April 1940, Oslo, Norway. German aircraft roar above the city and soldiers move swiftly through streets, offices, and ministries, taking control with practice. Precision. Soon only a heavy silence settles over the Norwegian capital as the reality of occupation becomes clear. Civil servants remain at their desks under new authority, shopkeepers pull down shutters, and people watch from behind curtains, unsure of what the next hours will bring. Beneath the calm surface, fear grows quickly. Whispers spread about arrests already taking place, about lists being prepared, about questions that will soon be asked behind closed doors. Silence begins to feel like the only form of safety. Behind the visible power of the German armed forces stands another force, less visible but far more threatening. It does not march in formation or occupy public squares. It moves quietly into police buildings, private apartments, basements, and interrogation rooms before resistance can fully organize itself. It is already being mapped, infiltrated, and prepared for destruction. This is the beginning of a hidden war against the Norwegian population, a war fought with fear, torture, and absolute control. At the center of this machinery of repression stands one man who soon becomes both feared by prisoners and trusted by his Nazi superiors. His name is Siegfried Fehmer. Siegfried Wolfgang Fehmer was born on 10 January 1911 in Munich, then part of the German Empire. His parents belonged to the Baltic German community and held Russian citizenship. During the First World War, the family lived in Moscow, where his father worked as a civil engineer. The collapse of the old Tsarist order and the violence of the Russian Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 became part of Fehmer's childhood memories. As a young boy, he experienced hunger, chaos, and fear, spending time hiding from street fighting. These years left him deeply hostile toward communist revolution and radical social disorder and helped shape his later loyalty to authoritarian power of the far right. In October 1918, as war and revolution tore Eastern and Central Europe apart, the family moved to Berlin and adopted German citizenship. Fehmer grew up in the turbulent years of the Weimar Republic, a state marked by street fighting between political extremes, economic hardship, and non-functional democracy. Order and authority were weak, and many Germans longed for stability and strength. Fehmer proved to be disciplined and ambitious. He studied law at a Berlin university, choosing a profession that promised structure, hierarchy, and influence. On 1 January 1930, while still a student, he joined the Nazi Party, showing early commitment to a movement that promised national revival, strict control, and a fight against the enemies of Germany. His early entry is visible also on his relatively low party number, 181,345. Fehmer completed his legal studies in 1933. The same year, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. This coincidence also marked the beginning of Fehmer's rapid rise. He passed his legal traineeship examination in December of that year, and a few months later, on 18 April 1934, he married Annie Will. Shortly afterward, he began working as an assistant for the Berlin police authorities, gaining practical experience in state security work. During this period, he also cooperated with senior police leaders responsible for reshaping German policing into an instrument of Nazi power. Law, ideology, and repression increasingly merged, and Fehmer adapted easily to this environment, learning how violence could be hidden behind legal language and official procedure. On 1 October 1934, Fehmer formally joined the Gestapo, the secret state police, which was tasked with hunting down political opponents and enforcing loyalty to the Nazi regime. It was possible thanks to an acquaintance in the secret police who recommended Fehmer to Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the Gestapo at that time, and one of the chief architects of Nazi terror. Heydrich was impressed with Fehmer's memory for faces and voices, and Fehmer soon started to work on communist cases, learning how surveillance, informers, and interrogations could dismantle illegal networks and spread fear among the enemies of the Nazi movement. His legal training allowed him to cloak repression in bureaucratic language, turning violence into procedure. His efficiency and reliability attracted the attention of higher authorities, and soon promotions came his way. Between 1937 and 1939, Fehmer served in the city of Kurslin, today Koszalin in northern Poland, as head of counterintelligence. There he skills in intelligence work and repression, dealing with real and perceived enemies of the state. By the time the Second World War started on 1 September 1939 with the German invasion of Poland, Fehmer had already built a reputation as a capable officer. In April 1940, after completing a demanding police course that only a small number of candidates passed, he was selected for service in occupied Norway, which Nazi Germany invaded under the code name Operation Weserübung on 9 April 1940. The Norwegian army in mainland Norway capitulated on 10 June 1940. Norway had become strategically crucial for Germany. Its coastline offered naval access to the North Sea, and control of the country protected iron ore shipments from Sweden, which were vital for the German war economy. On 29 April 1940, Fehmer arrived in the Norwegian capital, Oslo, with other members of the German security services, and began his task of suppressing the Norwegian resistance in all its forms. The Gestapo became responsible for crushing resistance, which soon emerged in many forms. Norwegian military groups organized sabotages and were gathering crucial intelligence for the Allies, while civilians distributed illegal newspapers, maintained contact with the Norwegian government in exile, and helped Jews escape to neutral Sweden. These activities posed a constant threat to German authority and undermined any attempt to present the occupation as orderly or accepted. Though a collaborationist government was installed, real power rested with the occupation authorities and the German security services. As in other countries of Nazi-occupied Europe, the Gestapo in Norway built an extensive network of informers. Neighbors were encouraged to report suspicious behavior, letters were intercepted, and cafes were watched. Fear entered everyday life, and people spoke quietly in their own homes and learned to trust only a few. Those taken were isolated from family and friends, transferred to interrogation centers, and subjected to questioning that could last for days. Many prisoners disappeared into concentration camps or were executed without trial. Fehmer was assigned to fight the Norwegian resistance, and he soon became one of its most feared enemies. In Oslo, he carefully shaped his public image. He appeared confident, polite, and approachable, often walking openly through the city in uniform, accompanied by his dog. He spoke calmly, listened attentively, and later also learned Norwegian fluently, which allowed him to communicate directly with prisoners but also in public. This appearance of normality lowered defenses of the other citizens. Many initially underestimated him, mistaking his manners for restraint. Ida Nicolene Manus, a member of the Norwegian resistance, described Fehmer as follows after meeting with him in Oslo in the spring of 1941. There was a man who was so cheerful and helpful. He was exceptionally handsome, with high cheekbones, light hair, and the most wonderful blue eyes. He was a German officer, but I remember thinking that if we had met under other circumstances, he was definitely a man I could have fallen for. Later I found out who he was. During interrogations, Fehmer often began with friendly conversation, creating a false sense of safety before abruptly turning to intimidation and violence. In January 1941, Heinrich Himmler, who led the SS and controlled the security apparatus, visited Norway and ordered the introduction of enhanced interrogation methods. These methods involved physical torture and were justified as necessary for German security. Fehmer supported this approach and played a central role in organizing it in Norway. He helped draft internal guidelines that claimed to regulate the. When 62-year-old Sand refused to cooperate with Germans, his arms were broken during interrogation and later. His legs were also shattered. He was treated in hospital only to be returned to Gestapo custody. For further torture, Sand survived, but his body was permanently damaged. His endurance made him a symbol of resistance, as he was named the hardest tortured person in Norway during the war. While Fehmer's role in his suffering became emblematic of the occupation's cruelty. As the war progressed, resistance activity intensified rather than collapsed. One of the most prominent organizations was Milorg, the military branch of the Norwegian resistance, which coordinated armed resistance and sabotage operations. As these operations multiplied, intelligence continued to reach the Allies and German losses mounted. In response, the Gestapo escalated repression. Executions increased, prisons filled, and entire resistance cells were wiped out. Siegfried Fehmer's authority expanded within this system. On 4 July 1944, he was seriously injured during an operation against one of Milorg's radio transmitters in the Oslo area. Fehmer was shot in the head and suffered a fractured skull and wounds to his upper arm from hand grenade shrapnel. Despite this setback, he returned to duty after 2 months. In 1945, as Nazi Germany faced defeat and reorganized its security forces in Norway, Fehmer became head of Department IV of the Gestapo in Oslo, responsible for counterintelligence and interrogations during the final months of occupation. By then, the Gestapo no longer aimed to win cooperation, but to delay collapse through fear and terror alone. Describing the tall, strong Nazi official with blonde hair and blue eyes as first-class education, above-average intelligence, excellent memory, excellent communication skills, impressive appearance, perhaps a little too smooth. During imprisonment, Fehmer tried to portray himself as cooperative and useful. He wrote,